In the depths of the CECOT prison, a figure emerges who stands out among the others. Old Lin, whose voice, filled with years of struggle and defiance, is about to pierce through the walls that contain him. Sitting in the darkness of his cell, Old Lin writes a message. It's not a simple letter. It's a challenge, a proclamation, a message addressed directly to the President of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele. What message does El Salvador really want to give? Stay until the end of the video and find out. Before we begin, leave your registration with the like button and subscribe to our stories. They'll surely catch you. Now, activate the bell so we can begin. On the morning of January 7th, 2003, the front page of the newspapers proudly announced that the UN had concluded its verification of the peace accords. A symbolic sign was drawn up, and the word peace was written on it. He could have kept his degree on a letterhead in a folder in some office in New York. At night, Old Lin, whom the police had already identified as the main leader of Barrio 18 in El Salvador, stopped by Dina, a small popular neighborhood south of San Salvador, to visit Chino Paiser. The young local palabrero leader gave him a hug of respect and support. The atmosphere in the area had been tense a few days earlier. Paiser R.A., whose name was Mariano Alberto Salazar Garcia, had ordered the execution of one of his soldiers, the Kyush, as exemplary punishment for losing a weapon. A high price that outraged part of the gang, especially Cranky. The Cranky, the palabrero leader from a nearby IBU neighborhood, ruled the area in the gang's ambiguous system of hierarchies and respect. Authority spread to neighboring territories, and the IBU leader had warned Paiser not to kill him. The life of an H-boy isn't worth a weapon, but Paiser, at 19, felt he had enough character and support to decide what was fair and what wasn't. On his court, in a small drug market on the 8th Streets he controlled through the leadership of the gang, and Lin, his face visible that night of January 7th at 9:30 a.m. While Lin and Paiser were talking, Cranky and his eternal lieutenant, Duque, entered the Dina and waited for minutes. After Lin left, they approached, took Paiser aside, and murdered him on 17th Street. They shot him with an AK-47 and an M16. Weapons of war were used to kill a homeboy for having killed another homeboy, and above all, to say something to all the 18-year-olds. The gang can't continue to govern like this. Lin considered it a betrayal. He thought Frankie should have consulted him about an action like that. Killing someone he had just hugged was an intolerable breach of trust. Encouraged by Lin, dozens. In the following days, armed gang members searched for Cranky and Duke to kill them. They didn't find them, but that night a fight to the death began to clarify the boundaries of the flock and make Cranky understand that Barrio 18 had only one stick and only one judge. In the mid-1970s in Los Angeles, a man named Blanca approached a Salvadoran boy of about 12 years old who was staring out the window of a restaurant, his accent spitting out as if each syllable were a whiplash. He warned him, "We don't speak Spanish here. We don't speak Spanish." He meant to say in the mind of that thin, almost fragile-looking boy. Those words still resonate. He remembers them with a sour smile when we asked him to explain why he became a gang member. At what age, in what place? He tries not to be precise in his answer for the safety of others, but he reveals that contempt for the Latinos, the leaden desire to spit back at the one who marginalized him and led him to seek out the gang. He got his first 18th birthday tattoo. He remembers being well __ in the United States in the distant 70s. He jumped the gang, the bastards of 18th Street. He stopped calling himself Carlos, and his new brothers beat him to death. They baptized him Lin in El Salvador, more than 3 decades later. No one remembers that X and the Y was changed to a Y. Here it is LN, and on July 2nd, 2011, he turned 49. The height and impenetrability of a shadow varies depending on how the light hits it and for where you look. A good part of the authority that Old Lin had or has in the 18th Street neighborhood rests on his enigma, where the shadow of his meager body, which, by being excessive and intangible, ended up becoming mythical and reigning among men many times. Strong and always armed, their diffuse origins, their surprising appearance in late 2002. In a gang leadership that few Know how he rose there in the gang? Who even heard that in the 80s Lin was a civilian selling drugs to the 18th Street neighborhood. In the United States, others wonder if he even knows how to speak English, and there are those who doubt whether he was in the North. Lin's gang members past. It is an essential part of his long shadow that he belonged to the Revolutionary Party of Central American Workers. PRTC is a truth that he himself made public years ago, but word of mouth from the gang T. He still stretches and bends it, like unwritten laws, until it appears gigantic. They say he was in the guerrilla. They tell you with respect, even the 18-year-olds who hate him. As if on the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front, FMLN, Lin had learned to be tougher, more fatal. It has nothing to do with ideologies. The same thing happens with other 18-year-olds who serve in the army during the Salvadoran Civil War. Having fought in a war gave them and the gang an aura of lost innocence that the kids, the young gang members, kids with guns won't reach, no matter how much they say they rape and tattoo on their faces, the 3 C's that add up to 18. Lin's first prison sentence was, it's ironic, that of a revolutionary. He was 18 years old. He says he was captured in February of 1981 in an ambush in a canton of Sonsonate, along with the commandante, Arlen Wasapasilia Margarita Alfaro, a comrade, to whom the PRTC leadership still pays tribute, unlike him, whom curiously everyone in the FMLN has forgotten, or almost everyone. After serving time in the Sonsonate prison and the clandestine jails of the National Police, he ended up in the La Esperanza prison in Mariona, in Sector 1, then reserved for political prisoners. Lin occupied the cell of another PRTC activist who shared a sentence with him in those days. He remembers him as having curly, shoulder-length hair, always dressed in a dark black or brown hat and an inseparable green cap with a pin on the visor. He was serious and not fond of jokes. Talking with Mojica meant being willing to argue loudly because he was very serious and had clear ideas, says his former friend. Later, he would be transferred to Sector 2 of the prison, where Link met Jose Antonio Morales Carbonell, son of the Christian Democratic leader Jose Antonio Morales Ehrlich, at the time a member of the civic military junta that governed a country adrift, whose prison record would grow to obscenity. In the following decades, there is evidence of Carlos Ernesto Mojica Letis's imprisonment for subversive purposes and his release by direct order of the Supreme Court of Justice on April 1, 1982. Lin was probably the first Barrio 18 gang member to lean against the walls of Mariona prison. After his time in Mariona, Lin returned to the mountains, fought in the Wasapa volcano, and was under the orders of the then Minister of Security, Manuel Melgar, about what happened. However, Lin is elusive. His former comrade in arms in prison claims that Mojica deserted the PRTC in 1983. He simply says that he traveled back to Los Angeles. In the mid-1980s, he and his reunited comrades from Barrio 18 joyfully welcomed the first graffiti of the Mara Salvatrucha gang on the walls of neighborhoods inhabited mostly by Central Americans. He, a member of the Eating Street gang, celebrated the rise of Salvadorans in the city. However, the deadly enmity that, since 1989, has united the MS-13 and Barrio 18 like two faces in a mirror had not yet emerged. Lin also maintained a closer connection to his homeland than most of the young people who grew up in Southern California in the 1970s and 1980s, with a Salvadoran surname and nostalgia, but speaking, thinking, and rifling in English. He didn't take root there and returned to El Salvador. His shadows are lost until the light of an archive projects them again against the wall of another prison. He entered Santa Ana, accused of robbery, on December 29, 1992. He left 6 months later, acquitted. The innocent man returned to that same prison on October 12 for homicide. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, we invite you to give us your like and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. We continue with his latest and most controversial capture after leaving prison in 2002. Old Man Lin seemed to want to get back on track, as he was able to stay out of the criminal spotlight for several years, something many considered impossible given his reputation, and it was expected that in less than a year he would be seen behind bars again, either for killing someone again or for selling illegal merchandise, a task he was indeed engaged in. But given the contacts he made within the same prison, they helped him learn to move more intelligently and calmly, as he tended to be. Quite explosive in his younger years, so if he did something bad, he wasn't just threatening, but more of the type who took the first thing at his disposal and then killed the person who had done such a thing to him. But after the time he spent in prison and the things he experienced inside, they taught him to learn to be more cautious and analytical, because being caught quickly didn't mean he liked being in prison. On the contrary, he defined himself as a nature lover because he liked the feeling of the breeze and the trees and being able to see the sunset every afternoon. And with him, a new day. He hated every time they sent him to jail, as he could only see darkness in every corner. Such was his hatred for the feeling that he swore he would never be in that situation again, no matter what the cost. This was confirmed years later. Given his award-winning fame within the Mara gang, his head had a very high price for the police who wanted to find him in order to weaken La Peligrosa gang, a task that was thought impossible, but with help both inside and outside the country and some informants within the gang, they managed to locate Old Lin. What they didn't expect was what happened during the transfer of the man. Fulfilling what he had promised during his trip, the old man began talking to the group of police officers who were guarding him, to the point of offering them more than 10 million pesos to each of them who were guarding them in that car. It was more than $50 million, a figure that would greatly harm his business. But it was an acceptable price for Lin if, in exchange, he didn't go to jail again. Doubtful whether he did it or not, the old man, in a final move, told them about an exact address where he had stashed the money. Doubtful but curious, the police agreed. They arrived at the address. What awaited us was that, among the maneuvers of the former head of the Mara, he managed to slip out of the handcuffs that held him captive and then escaped at full speed. However, the furious police shot at the van, causing one of the tires to burst and losing control of the vehicle, causing it to fall into a ravine. At the time, it was thought that Old Lin had died, but as if by a miracle, he was badly injured and with a couple of broken ribs, he managed to survive and head for the jungle, where, shortly after, he would find the house of a farmer who would help him, thinking that he had been the victim of some animal. After his wounds were healed a few days later, he asked for a phone so he could call his men to come for him. But this is not a message of surrender, but a plea for mercy. Old Lin, the firmness that characterizes him, calls for change, a revolution not of arms, but of ideas. He seeks to ignite a spark of hope, not only for those behind bars next to him, but for an entire country. President Bukele begins Old Lin. The peace we so long for is not built with the repression of the desperate, but with the creation of a future where we all have a place. His voice, recorded from the solitude of his cell, resonates with the authority of someone who has seen too much and dreams of a better tomorrow. Old Lin's message is clear. True peace requires courage, the courage of change, investing in the roots of our society, in education, opportunities, and justice. His challenge to the president is not a threat, but an invitation to lead this change. At the end of his message, Old Man Lin pauses, a silence laden with meaning. It is a space for us as a nation to reflect on the path we want to follow. The story of El Salvador is still being written, it concludes, and we all have a role in it. And so we come to the end of this video. If you liked it, I invite you to give us a like so we can continue making more videos like this. Also, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. I wish you a great day. Until next time.